After seeing all that, I can't imagine many of you are going to argue with me when I say that the DJI Mavic 2 Pro is an outstanding product. Put yourself behind the control sticks and your heart will melt as you see, in real time, the world unfold in front of you in glorious aerial majesty. Drones get a bad rap all over the world, with new laws prohibiting use and breaking news stories regarding pilots who don't bother to read those laws spiraling into a cesspool of bad vibes. A lot of the public hates drones, and many drone pilots have a distaste for flying because of it. I, for one, rarely flew my drone because of the unpleasantness of that experience, and the quality of the footage I was getting from my old Phantom 4 wasn't so great that I felt like I was missing out by not putting my thousands of dollars investment into the air. With the Mavic 2 Pro, that has changed. That has changed so much. When I had the Mavic 2 Pro, which I have since returned to DJI, I never left the house without it. As a package, it was smaller than some of my cameras and absolutely lighter. It easily slipped into just about any bag I would carry with me and be ready to put up in the air in a scant few seconds. DJI has made flying so easy that I don't question whether it's worth the effort anymore, but instead I'm more willing to just throw the drone up rather than hum and haw on the ground debating the worthiness of a shot I can't even see. To me, thanks to the DJI Mavic 2 Pro, drone photography has begun to peak. We are no longer forced to make a decision of choosing either drone size or camera quality. We can have both in one package, and that one package isn't even a budget breaker. The Mavic 2 Pro makes me want to be a better pilot. It gives me a sense of joy and wonder that I have not experienced since I first saw a drone photo, and then before that when HD video came to DSLRs. It's a wholly special experience, feeling wowed by the possibilities available to you as a creative person, and the Mavic 2 Pro made me feel that over and over again. I'm a video shooter. More specifically, I'm a professional commercial videographer. It's where I make my living and it's what I find myself shooting the most. When I look at new cameras, you'll find more .mp4 or .mov files on the memory cards than .jpeg or RAW files 9 times out of 10. It's what is important to me and is what I will spend a majority of my time shooting. But with the Mavic 2 Pro, that changed. When I looked through my footage, I found that I was actually taking more pictures than I was capturing video, and that's because the camera on the Mavic 2 Pro is spectacular for stills. It's jaw-droppingly good, actually. I never expected it to be this exceptional, especially considering the small size of the camera itself and my experience with drones in the past. But over and over again, I found myself just absolutely loving what you can do with the Mavic 2 Pro camera for making still images. Imagine putting a fixed lens RX100 into the sky. Of course the photos look good. They're the best looking images taken from any fixed camera drone I've ever seen. The ISO performance isn't fantastic, but it's far better than any drone I've shot on before outside of the Zenmuse cameras that mount on the Inspire. For a small, single operator drone, I am so impressed. I think the most standout reason to love the stills performance is the dynamic range. It's very good. Let me give you an example. I put the Mavic 2 Pro up over a waterfall in a densely filled jungle area in Hawaii and really wanted to capture the movement of the water. However, at the time there were no ND filters available for the drone, so I wasn't really able to properly drag the shutter and get the right exposure simultaneously. I was forced to close the aperture down pretty far to f11, that actually might be the maximum, and set the ISO as low as it would go, which is ISO 100. And then I had to drag the shutter for half a second. When I look at the unedited file, it is most certainly overexposed. 3 stops overexposed to be precise. For a small camera, recovering 3 stops worth of highlights is no easy ask. In fact, before this I would have said it was not possible. No drone I'd ever used outside of the Zenmuse is going to have that kind of flexibility. The Mavic 2 Pro does. In fact, it could keep going. I was being careful in Hawaii since my experience with it at the time and knowing what it was capable of was rather limited, but today if I had to reshoot that same footage, I might have dragged for a full second, maybe more. Looking at the DNG, that RAW file had plenty more ability to bring highlight data back down to earth. I'm confident in getting 4, maybe 5 stops of range there. It's also worth noting that this shot is even possible at all. That's a half-second shutter drag in the air with no motion. Look how sharp the result is. The Mavic 2 Pro is absolutely outstanding at maintaining its position and not moving at all, making this shot possible. Forget dynamic range for a moment and just think about how incredible that fact alone is. The quality of the photography on this drone leads directly into the next new ability of this drone, Hyperlapse. Aside from the Hasselblad written on the front of the lens, this was the next big feature DJI wanted customers to notice about the new drone. Shooting in different environments with the Mavic 2 Pro, I've had some mixed results with this feature. Before I get too far into that, it's really important to say that no matter what I personally experience, the fact that this is a feature and is possible at all is really pretty awesome. In the intro of this video review, you may have noticed a hyperlapse of the sun rising over Salesforce Tower in San Francisco. This is the first hyperlapse I attempted where it wasn't just a test, but legitimately trying to get a beautiful shot, and it also remains the only hyperlapse where I feel like it lives up to the hype. When you get a perfect situation like this, hyperlapse is absolutely worth the time and effort of putting together. This shot took 12 minutes with a 2-second interval, which is the shortest interval you can make, and I chose to have the drone do a kind of partial circle from its takeoff location, focus on the tower as its center point. There are several different modes you can choose from for hyperlapse, like line or custom waypoints, etc., but the settings are pretty much the same for every one of them, except for how you want the drone to move. You cannot drag the shutter for more than 1/30th of a second, which does kind of limit the water effects you can get, as well as how dark it can be when you shoot. So when I mentioned that I had mixed results with hyperlapse, that's due mostly to wind, from what I can tell. Even in that Salesforce Tower shot, you can see some wobbly corners. I noticed them in a few other hyperlapses to the point they made the end result pretty unusable, and the wobble was so distracting. Also, because of the shutter speed limit, shooting at night is really challenging, if not impossible. In other hyperlapses I did, the end result is pretty ugly due to a ton of noise and some pretty disgusting color shifting. All this said, when hyperlapse is working, the result is really special. The Mavic 2 Pro will generate a finished HD file in the drone after each completed hyperlapse, but also keeps every DNG that it shoots so that you can make your own edits later should you desire, like I do. Speaking of wind, as much as I'd like to gush about how stable and easy to control the Mavic 2 Pro is, which it is, I was a bit disheartened with how weak the gimbal felt when flying quickly and into the wind. I've never experienced this before, and maybe it also happened on the original Mavic that I never tested, but if you attempt to fly into the wind at any higher acceleration that the Mavic 2 Pro is capable of, you may see the gimbal just give out. In a few cases where I know I was flying in the upper threshold of what makes the Mavic 2 Pro acceptable, it gives you a warning on screen, the tilt of the gimbal would just stop working, and the shot I would be getting would be ruined. This obviously isn't ideal, and in places like San Francisco where I fly, and where wind conditions and temperature vary wildly in different pockets of the city, it sucks. But most of the time, flying up to and under the legal height limit in good conditions, you should not have a problem. Okay, so now let's finally talk about video performance of all these clips that you've been looking at here. Looking at the footage, you already know how I feel about this drone. It's excellent. This is some of the best looking footage I've seen out of any drone, period. Due to the size of the sensor, the types of lighting situations you'll be able to shoot in is much more limited than when shooting with something like the Inspire, but the Mavic 2 Pro is still 1/8 of the size of that drone, so it's a pretty good trade-off. What may be confusing to some of you are the two different 4K shooting modes, full frame of view and high quality. There's some considerable discussion online about what each of these are actually doing, whether you really get 10-bit in one or is it 8-bit, and what kind of image quality loss you will experience if you use full frame of view. So if you're like me and you spend a lot of time editing, color grading, and staring at video, you will probably notice that shooting at the full frame of view, something negative happens to your video footage on the Mavic 2 Pro. It seems to lose some quality, that is to say it just looks worse, and you may experience some blocking happening in areas, artifacting. This happened to me a lot on the original Phantom 4. I have to recommend that if you want to shoot the best possible footage, you definitely should be in the cropped, high quality mode, especially if you're planning to shoot in D-Log, which is great by the way. But I should also point out that there are times where you can't actually properly frame your shot if you're not using the full frame of view, which happened to me at this waterfall shot. I was physically pinned into a small break in the foliage and I could not back my drone up any farther than it was. If I choose to capture this in the cropped framing, my shot would have looked really unpleasant. It just wouldn't have been as good as what you see here. So I took the risk and captured it in the full FOV mode in D-Log. Because I happened to hit my exposure pretty close to correcting camera, I did not have to do a lot in post to make it look good. I did, however, notice that if I tried to push or pull the blacks even a lot of artifacting would appear. In short, be smart about how you want to shoot with the Mavic 2 Pro and how you intend to use the footage. Just like with any camera, it's important to know one's limits. All in all, I'm disappointed that in order to get the best footage on the Mavic 2 Pro, you have to use what is really a very significant crop. It's not ideal, but when you take an extra step back mentally and consider what you get as an entire package, which is a very powerful and extremely small flying camera, it's less of a big deal. Let's talk a bit about ISO performance, because this isn't the Mavic 2 Pro's strongest suit. With enough available light, night shooting can be pretty rewarding. Comparing a shot I got facing the San Francisco Bay, for example, looks pretty bad when compared to one when I turned the drone around and flew towards the city, which gives off a lot more light at night. In both cases, there's noticeable noise, though the shots of the ferry building in downtown are a lot more acceptable than the ones of the Bay Bridge, which kind of need to be black and white to hide all that noise. Stick under ISO 1600 and you'll be pretty happy with your videos. If you have to push it beyond that, you're going to be dealing with increasing amount of noise, color shifting, and a lot of sharpness loss. Look, we can nitpick things like the quality of footage and the strength of the gimbal, but in the end, they're basically meaningless in the face of this unassailable fact. This is the best overall drone anyone has ever made. It gets so much more right than it does wrong, and the quality of the photo and video next to the life of the battery and the quality of the build, along with the new features and you get the point. I could keep going. It's just a stacked deck of a product. If you already fly drones regularly and don't own a Mavic 2 Pro, you should. If you have never flown a drone before and are considering buying one, this is probably the one you should buy, if not also the Mavic Air being in the equation. It is so easy to fly and transport that when you compare the sheer value of that part of this product alone, it's criminal how good it is when you add the quality of the footage you can capture with it. For our full written review of the Mavic 2 Pro, head on over to imagingresource.com or check the link in the description. And for anything else, photo, video, and cameras, make sure you keep it locked to imagingresource.com.